Welcome back to a Munchausen's Proxy, where we have a last-minute challenger to the Rings of Power's until now undisputed title as the worst genre series of the year with the release of The Witcher: Blood Origin. Netflix's prequel miniseries has all the signs that point to them massively retconning aspects of The Witcher lore. Along with this ambitious endeavor, you also have all of the hallmarks that were present in the Rings of Power's lead up, including intersectional feminism, random alphabet mafia content, lack of understanding of how medieval societies work, rampant girl bossery, and sketchy CGI that ranges from alright to absolutely execrable. Some of this is obvious in the first episode, and some of it has come out in the promotional campaign that led up to the release. Before we get started on this spoiler review of Netflix's The Witcher: Blood Origin, let's get some disclosures out of the way. I am not a rabid Witcher fan. I have never played the games nor read the books. I watched the first season of the Netflix Witcher series with Henry Cavill and thought it was largely pretty good, though it had some fairly significant issues. I checked out of The Witcher when the showrunner Lauren Hissrich started talking about Season 2, and counterclaims of what she was saying was going to happen started leaking out of production, including Henry Cavill talking about really wanting them to stick more to the lore. The reviews and casual mentions from people who did watch the season confirmed my dread about the sophomore run. I could go on a rant about the people running the show not understanding, somehow, that people tune in to watch Henry Cavill fight monsters, not Yennefer angsting or Ciri wandering around the land, but I will refrain. Instead, let's get into episode 1 of Blood Origin. The episode opened in a battle taking place at night in the middle of a rainstorm, and for some reason the camera is upside down. You get various shots of men in armor killing each other before you see Jaskier, bound at the wrist in rope, stumbling about the battle, nearly being killed multiple times as he bounces off some of the combatants. He finally falls, and a guy with an axe is about to end him when the battle freezes. He gets up and starts wandering from warrior to warrior with mouth agape, instead of doing the smart thing and hauling his ass out of there after using one of the conveniently frozen blades to free his hands. He finally runs into a doppelganger of himself dressed like a court butterfly. His double casually displays supernatural powers, and Jaskier asks him why he looks like Jaskier. The double smiles and replies, "Because you love yourself. I have other faces if you prefer," before promptly turning into a monster, making Jaskier scream. The being transports him out of the battle and into a barren forest with snow flurries falling from the lead-gray sky. There is a monolith circle within the trees, and the creature appears as Minnie Driver in a pastel gown and pointed ears. She informs him that she brought him there because she wants him to sing a song back into existence. He is skeptical until she starts telling him the tale, and he excitedly begins to take notes on the stone altar in the middle of the circle. She tells him it is about 7 warriors who come together to fight an empire, and in the process unleash humans and monsters to the world via the conjunction of the spheres, and create the first of the Witchers. It begins 1200 years ago in the Elven Golden Age. The first scene starts with Inisdov appearing on the screen, first in Elven script before it turns into Roman letters. Inisdov is an island in the far northern seas, and we see a black woman enter a tavern with a harp. She is in the middle of playing her set when one of the patrons up and decides he wants to rape the barmaid in the middle of the tavern. Lark throws a knife into his leg to stop him, and throws a few more to stop his friends, before beating the crap out of 2 or 3 more for good measure. All without breaking a sweat. She then goes back on stage and apologizes for the interruption, and the rest of the patrons, who did nothing to stop the looming rape, toast her laughingly. In Zentrea, we get the same location script on screen before we hear that the new king wants to tour the streets to see what his people are dealing with, despite threats of assassination. Minnie Driver does the narration, and it is beyond annoying since she is basically telling us things we should be shown, some of which are eventually shown while she narrates. The king winds up in the middle of a street fight, of course, his bodyguards battling assassins to keep him and his sister, for some reason, who was with him, alive. One of the guards, by the name of Fjall, hauls the princess up into his saddle, and he and another guard bolt with her, trying to get her back to the palace. They take a shortcut through an alley, but are soon blocked off by assassins barricading both ends with wagons. Fjall hands the princess a short sword, and he and his buddy takes out the assassins rather easily. When they turn back to collect the princess, she, of course, has killed an assassin, her face blank with shock. Later, when they are back in her room, she seduces him in thanks for saving her, and in the process hints that they had done the deed before, but he was trying to stop since he is supposed to be guarding her, not screwing her. Of course, they are caught by his superior, who later turns out to be his father. Dad accompanies Fjall to the border of the kingdom and banishes him, taking his axe from him and telling him he will die unremembered. Back at the palace, as if her lover had not just been exiled, the princess is talking to the king, her brother, wanting to help him as an advisor. The king tells her that his generals and mages would eat her alive, but that there is a way she could help the kingdom, by marrying the king of one of their enemy kingdoms and thereby ending the 1,000-year war. She accedes to his plan rather glumly, and the scene ends. More narration tells us that the next scene is in the Valley of Lost Souls, where a lone warrior is striving to know more about the ominous shadow that has been cast across the land, but her ancestors are not answering her pleas. Like the Rings of Power, Blood Origin is graced with the presence of Lenny Henry. The next scene has him traveling between worlds to talk to a floating blue ball of energy. He asks it for help since the assassination attempt on the king failed, revealing him to be a rather duplicitous bastard. I guess this is better than the irritating leader of a band of psychopathic hobbits, but not by much, which I will get to later. Back in Innis Dove, the barmaid from earlier wants to know how Lark got to be so awesome and learned to fight. Lark tells the girl that she was born into a family of protectors/bodyguards, and claims her swordmaster had a key harp on the wall that led her astray from that path. The girl then tells her that she has a sickness that gives her visions, which makes the townfolk afraid of her. She is about to tell the barmaid something when Lark is arrested for the fight in the tavern. She is put into a cell with Fjall, who just so happens to be from an enemy clan, and put out her cousin's eye during a battle. She tells him that she vowed vengeance for her cousin. They are about to fight when the guards show up to tell Fjall that his freedom has been bought. Just as he's getting ready to leave, Lark attacks him. They scrum a bit, and the guards get ready to intervene when they separate and Fjall leaves the cell. The king of Zentrea then walks into a council meeting to get a briefing from his military advisors. After getting mostly bad news, he tells them that he is planning to marry his sister to the enemy king, thereby ending their war. He is planning a treaty ceremony with the other two realms. The generals object, but the king holds firm. One of the generals turns to Lenny Henry and asks what he thinks of this plan. Lenny replies that he is no longer an advisor to the throne on any subject other than magic. We are then jumping back to Innisdove, and by this point I was heartily tired of the editing of this show. It bounces around like a rabbit on speed with little or no rhyme or reason. Anyway, Fjall is leaving the village to look for a brothel when the person who paid to get him free comes up on his rear. It is a seriously dark-skinned dude who he calls cousin, despite Fjall being very, very pale. He informs Fjall that there is a peace treaty planned and that his father, the chief of the bodyguards of the king of Zentrea, wants him to come back and help protect the king. And this scene points out the extremely poor way time is shown in this episode. Literally the scene before, we were in Zentrea being told about the peace treaty, and here we are, at least several hundred miles away, being shown Fjall's cousin summoning him back for it. Much like the Rings of Power, there is really bad time transition in this show, and it is jarring throughout. When Fjall finally finds a brothel, the pimp tells him he has to pay first. He then utters one of the dumbest lines I have heard in this episode. He tells the pimp, quote, "My word is my coin," unquote. This is beyond retarded. Anyway, the pimp is less than impressed with this, and Fjall goes to pay him with his silver necklace, only to discover it was lifted off of him by Lark in their tussle, which she is using to pick the lock on the cell. This is also idiotic, since silver is a fairly soft metal, and locks are generally made from iron or steel. Lark goes back for her harp and hears somebody playing it, bringing a smile to her face. She thinks it's the barmaid and is saying that she will make a player out of her yet when she enters the room to find her sister sitting on the bed playing it. Her sister, like Fjall's cousin, is there to bring her back to her home kingdom to help their mother protect the ruler of their nation at the peace treaty conference in Zentrea. Lark tells her sister she is not coming back. She is crying when the barmaid comes in to check on her. She hugs Lark and has a vision where she sees Lark, of course, being the key to everything, hinting she will be going on a quest to save the world. Lark catches up to her sister walking to the boat the next morning, presumably, when her sister is killed by an assassin. Other assassins show themselves and she easily kills them as they conveniently attack her one by one. She is then saved by Fjall, who acts as the one smart one in the bunch who has snuck up on her blind side. As they are getting ready to leave, they realize that the soldiers are from the armies of all three warring kingdoms. They come to the conclusion that the clans guarding the kings are going to be targeted at the treaty signing, and decide to stick together for safety as they go to warn them. Lark tells Fjall that she is no longer going by Lark, that she is Ayla, and she will avenge her sister. She then threatens Fjall's Johnson, telling him that if he betrays her, that she will cut his junk off and feed it to the dogs. And like most men in movies and TV these days, he is too much of a cuck to make any response at all. They then give her sister to the pyre and leave. During the treaty ceremony, the princess has her brother, the Queen of Darwin, and the King of Prussia, along with all of their bodyguards, killed by a dragon-like monster. She also kills Fjal's sister personally as she, Lenny Henry, and the military folks slipped out of the ceremony and locked the doors behind them to make sure the monster would get all of the people they wanted killed. Merwin then takes the throne of all three kingdoms as empress. Fjall and Ayla run into a storm while at sea and get knocked off course. Yeah, that's it for that scene. Good job, editors. Good job. Balor, that's Lenny Henry's character, and the military leader, who is so unremarkable in this episode that I didn't catch his name if they mentioned it, are in cahoots to use Merwin as a figurehead to placate the masses as they secure the Empire. The Empress is presenting herself to the people on a balcony overlooking the city. She decides she wants to go down to them, but the guards prevent it, so she goes back to basking in the adoration of her people. She realizes that she will probably only live until they no longer need her. In Gaelth, former Prussia, Fjall and Ayla come ashore and head to a town to find out what the hell is going on. As they head to a tavern, Ayla does a little pickpocketing for cash along the way. One of the patrons insults the new empress when two soldiers enter the tavern, and one of them bashes the guy's face on a table until he is either dead or passed out. They then show drawings of Fjall and Ayla, asking if anyone has seen them, but the two have already decamped. Not, however, without a rather large dude noticing them. Back in the palace at Zentrea, Balor and military dude argue over not being able to raise enough monoliths around the Empire. Military dude explains that he had more desertions than he was expecting and needs his troops to subdue any rebellion. When he suggests having the mages help him, Balor is forced to admit he had to kill some mages who were not going along with the new program also. They need the monoliths to power more gateways around the Empire. Balor then asks about Fjall and Ayla, ordering them killed immediately. Nightfall, and Fjall and Ayla sit around a fire and talk about Merwin, and whether or not she is evil. Fjall acknowledges that she needs to be held accountable for the deaths of their kin, but he doubts she is the one who came up with the plan. They swear a blood oath together to take vengeance on the Empress and all responsible for killing their clans. In what one can only presume is the next day, Merwin is trying to justify her actions and teaming up with Balor and military dude, thereby becoming a puppet empress, to her friend. She begins planning how to escape Balor's strings and become empress in the mold of those she read about in her history books, wanting to usher in a new golden age. In a locked cell somewhere in the palace, a man is watching people raise a monolith in Zentrea. There are calculations scribbled all over the wall, and his hands are shackled. Balor walks in right after the prisoner wonders aloud what he has done. Balor tells him he has created the future. His name is Sindril, and he is the man who discovered the first monolith that allowed Balor enough power to travel to the other worlds. Balor orders him to finish the calculations to unite the other monoliths being set up across the Empire, the goal being able to power large enough portals to allow the ruler to move large bodies of troops across the Empire in a moment's notice. Then we skip back to Fjall and Ayla. Fjall has a hard time believing that the armies of the three nations united. But if they have, it will be next to impossible to get into the palace to kill those responsible for their clan's murders. Ayla suggests finding her old swordmaster, who is exiled for being responsible for Ayla refusing the warrior's path and becoming a bard. While they are walking, they come across a group of refugees who give them news of monolith raisings and the army sacking towns, killing the men and women and taking the children as slaves to help with the monoliths. It is at this point we get an Ayla affirmation in the form of one of the women in the group recognizing her as Lark, asking her to sing her song Black-Thorned Rose and praising her music as brilliant. It has apparently become a rallying song amongst the lower classes throughout the Three Kingdoms. The refugees walk on, singing the song, and soon the pair come to the region where her swordmaster lives. She cautions Fjall to be careful, that her master is paranoid and sets traps. And because the riders are idiots, they have Fjall scoffing as he begins to walk backwards while telling her he saw the pit traps just as he falls into a pit trap. While she is laughing at him, her old master appears with a sword to her throat. Another choppy edit has us back with Balor, going to visit his ball of light on the other world again. She asks why he is back after she gave him everything he wanted, and didn't her monster rid him of the king? He responds that yes, she did, but now he chafes under the pretense of the Empress as ruler, and wants to be emperor himself. He wants abilities that no other elf has. He wants chaos magic, so he can be a god amongst elves. And back to Fjall and Ayla, where her master Sion is less than impressed with Ayla's plan for her to join them in avenging their clans. Sion hates Fjall because his king wiped out her clan, leaving her as the last, taken in by Ayla's clan. She won't go with them because she does not trust Fjall. And then we get another idiotic scene by the writers seemingly designed to bring Fjall down as a character, and makes me wonder why the two women need Fjall at all. He fights Sion and she makes him look completely inept. Ayla joins in on his side and Sion still makes them look foolish. And then for some reason she decides to join their quest after all? After showing that they are so far beneath her ability that she beats them both at the same time without breaking a sweat? So they walk away, Sion saying that 3 against an empire is not enough, her house burning behind her. And that is how they end episode 1. Oh, lordy. Where to begin with this mess? First, let me say that people who watch this show are pretty united on what they think. It sucks. The critics' score on Rotten Tomatoes at the time of recording is 33%, and when you narrow it to top critics, it drops to 20%. The audience is even more scathing, with their score at 10%, and it was even lower before time of recording. I get the feeling the activists have been mobilized to bump up that score. While The Witcher: Blood Origin was not as cringingly and horrifically bad as the Rings of Power to me, I am not a Witcher nerd, and so I do not know exactly how badly they have butchered the lore. I can say the dialogue was less bad middle school Shakespearean play, but that does not mean it was not bad. It was. There were far too many linguistic anachronisms in this script for something that is trying to convince you it is a high fantasy setting. Speaking of trying to convince you it is a high fantasy setting, Hollywood, we need to talk. You idiots need to grasp the concept that not everywhere and every when is Los Angeles, California in 2022. There's an entire planet that does not look like your modern world. And the way you constantly want to make things homogeneously diverse is counterproductive to immersion in films that do not take place in modern-day Los Angeles. There is a reason that, until the early 19th century, most places on Earth were pretty ethnically homogeneous. The reason is twofold, and both apply nearly universally. First, it was damn hard to travel anywhere before the advent of the railroad, and that travel tended to be dangerous. Whether it was trying to cross the oceans in leaky wooden ships or trudging across long miles of land by foot or horse, travel was arduous, and so people tended to stay close to home unless given a reason to stray, and those reasons were few and far between. Second, most people had an aversion to outsiders. The less you looked, spoke, and acted like a local, the less the locals trusted you. In case anybody is missing the hints, I am once again pointing out the idiocy of medieval worlds that have ethnically diverse populations in very small geographical areas. Not only is this not how such worlds work, but it makes it difficult to tell who is supposed to be with who when a pasty white dude has a cousin who is darker than the black clothes he wears. And then there are the accents. They are all over the place, despite some of the characters supposedly being from the same region of the same country. There is no differentiation with them, adding to the inability to separate the various factions by speech, ethnicity, etc. Unlike the Rings of Power, I will say Netflix does not need to audit the Blood Origins costume department. The costumes were fairly decent, with the armor and weapons not looking like cheap, ridiculous garbage, and the clothing looked fairly on point, if not overly extraordinary. They did what they were supposed to without going the extra mile. The writing, dialogue-wise, was not great. Story-wise is a whole different story. They took what should be a cool premise, where did the Witchers come from, and completely bent it over a table and buggered it. There is no setup for most of the nonsense that goes on in this episode. The banishment of Fjall following an idiotic street fight with assassins was ham-handed at best. The constant validation of Lark/Ayla makes some of the stuff Disney Marvel is doing these days look subtle. Never mind her ability to toss around guys twice her size with a 5-foot, 4-inch, 125-pound frame. Princess Merwin's veering off into fratricide and regicide all in one evening was also insanely moronic. And the hints that the writers would be framing her as some kind of sympathetic character in later episodes is beyond deranged. She just slit a woman's throat and had a 3-headed dragon sicked on her brother, his protectors, and the other rulers and their protectors. Not to mention all of the people Balor and Military Dude have killed since the coup. There is no redeeming Merwin. Then there are the fight scenes, which are better than the Rings of Power, but that is not saying much. There is far too much of the convenient stuntman allowing himself to get his ass kicked about the scenes with Ayla. The scenes with Fjall were better, if only because they were more believable. The CGI is spotty. Very spotty. The cityscapes look like bad cutscenes from 90s video games. Something like SimCity or Pharaoh or Age of Empire. The sets supposedly inside those buildings look even worse, with rooms and furniture that look more like some modern decorator was set loose on the sets to bring a modern minimalist look to Zentrea. Again, it jars you out of what is supposed to be a medieval setting. The village sets look much more realistic, and they fit the locations the characters find themselves in, but the NPC characters do not act like they should, especially the tavern scene with the barmaid and the brothel scene with Fjall. Which brings me around to performances. Let me start with Minnie Driver, the supernatural being who starts this whole story off and narrates. Her narration is redundant, more often than not, with much pretension in its verbiage. The show could do well without it. I want the series to show me what is going on, not have someone off camera tell me while some of it is shown and some of it is not. And there's also Jaskier, who was the most annoying character in the Witcher series, and why they had to bring him in for this one is beyond me. Luckily, we are spared too much of him in this. The Fjall character would be good if the writers were not bound and determined to portray him as a cuck at least 3 times an episode, which is how he comes off in this one. His motivations are all over the map, with zero consistency to any of it. He is at once naive and worldly, which also does not work. But the actor playing him is doing his best with the mess given to him. Lark Ayla might be a good character if the writers were not girl-bossing her all over the screen nearly every moment she is on screen with a male character. When that is not happening, they have various people stop by to give her affirmation as to how awesome and vital and stunning and brave she is. It is a shame because the actor is not unlikable, as Morfydd Clark was as Galadriel in The Rings of Power. Michelle Yeoh as Cian is good, but I think that is more because I love Michelle Yeoh and have for decades. She is simply amazing, and I can't say much bad about her or her performance that I can lay at her feet. The writers had her join our merry band of rebels way too easily, and she is portrayed as a wise woman, but picks a fight with Fjall. Other than those 2 minor complaints, she was fine. Merwin, however, is a mess. She very well may be the Galadriel of this series. She is inconsistent, annoying, emotionally vapid, psychotic, ridiculously naive even while she plays at power politics, and seems to have a selective memory where her favorite subject, history, is concerned. I would like to think it's just first episode settling in that needs to be done with the actress, as Millie Alcock did with Princess Rhaenyra on House of the Dragon. But this is only a 4-episode miniseries, and there won't be enough time to show if that is the case for her. They will have to move this story along fairly briskly. And finally, Lenny Henry and Military Dude. Military Dude was so unremarkable that I did not bother remembering his name, and I did not care enough to look him up. He was bland and so unrealistic as a soldier it is laughable. He looks like a member of a boy band who has aged out of the group and had to find something else to do with the rest of his life now that he can't really pass as a teen heartthrob. In no universe would I believe he was a soldier, never mind worked his way up to general. Lenny Henry, on the other hand, is as memorable in this show as he was in The Rings of Power, and not in a good way. Lenny was a comedic actor in the 1990s before largely disappearing into guest appearances and voice roles, and serving as a presenter for awards shows and nostalgia compilations. He should have stuck to that. If these 2 shows are any indication, he is not a good dramatic actor. His character of Balor is poorly written, perhaps more so than any other barring Merwin maybe. While he is mostly in the background for most of the show, His scenes with the blue ball of light do not show him in a favorable light. The writing can account for some of it, but not all. He is stiff and awkward in more than one scene, and that has nothing to do with the writing and everything to do with Lenny himself. Which is a shame because I loved him in his BBC show Chef. He was funny and personable with a range of emotion that is missing in both Blood Origin and Rings. None of the other characters in this show stuck out beyond those 6, which is probably good for those actors' prospects for getting future roles that don't suck. I wanted The Witcher to be an awesome show, and the first season showed promise that has since been squandered as Lauren Hissrich takes an awesome IP and runs it off a cliff. Declan DeBarra, the showrunner for Blood Origin, is even less experienced than Hissrich, and is not even bothering to tempt the executives at Netflix into extending Blood Origin into a full series. Just about every aspect of this show has issues, if not on the grand scale that shows like The Rings of Power, She-Hulk, and Willow have managed to slip by any form of quality control at their respective studios. Unless Blood Origin gets remarkably better in the next episode, it will be joining that list as Netflix's first entry in the Hall of Shame, quickly filling up due to the complete incompetence of Hollywood executives in overseeing such big budget IPs and the writers and showrunners that are hired for them. I am still amazed that these shows' dailies are not seen and executives in charge of shelling out tens of millions of dollars for them are not frothing at the mouth to have them fixed before anyone else gets a look at a single frame. Hollywood has taken me from a place where I passionately supported those projects I found worthy and ignoring those that were not, always hoping for the former, of course, to a place where I just want to help Hollywood speed up its own retarded demise. Each new disaster they release makes me more and more eager to help them pour on the lighter fluid until I've reached the point of wanting to call them pussies and offer them some thermite or napalm to speed the process up. The faster the dinosaur legacy media corporations seppuku themselves, the quicker we might actually get back to a place where entertainment companies believe their purpose for being in business is to entertain, not lecture their audience about their every pet cause and political ideology. Needless to say, but I recommend skipping The Witcher Blood Origin, as it looks like a mess from which there is no rescuing it. And that is all I have for you in this video. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure the bell icon is clicked on so you are notified when new videos upload. Please share the video and leave a comment or a constructive criticism below. I will be working on episode 2 of Blood Origin, and hopefully we'll have that out in the next day or so. But I've got family still in town from the holidays, so we'll see. I will see you in the next video. Tschüss.